The Flame in the Flood is a single-player survival game released on February 24, 2016 for PC and Xbox One. I played using the PC version via Steam. It features roguelike elements and puts a focus on exploration, material collecting, crafting, and maintaining the health of the player character. The game has two modes of play. The first, a campaign mode, follows the narrative of a female survivor named Scout in the wilderness and a dog, Asa, in their search for civilization following a calamity. They ride a raft down the rivers of the southern United States while stopping periodically on land for supplies. The land stops are procedurally generated, but the overarching biomes that contain them and several events are predetermined. This mode has established goals and a narrative conclusion. The second mode is Endless Mode. This mode strips out the story and is an endurance match to see how long the player can survive with randomly generated biomes and land stops. The developer of the game is the Molasses Flood. Their name came from the Great Molasses Flood, an incident in Boston, Massachusetts back in 1919 that involved the explosion of a large molasses storage tank, killing 21, injuring 150. They are based in Cambridge, MA. While it is an independent studio, Molasses Flood, which consists of 6 members, is full of AAA veterans. They all had worked at Irrational Games at some point, and between them also did work at Harmonix and Bungie, working on series such as BioShock, Halo, Rock Band, and Guitar Hero. Their members are Forrest Dowling and Chad LeClaire as designers, artists Scott Sinclair and Gwen Frey, and engineers Brian Bennett and Damien Isla, declaring themselves now as AAA refugees and now working far from the big West Coast studios. The Flame in the Flood is their first game. The Molasses Flood started their Kickstarter for the game on October 7, 2014, with a goal of $150,000. Quite modest coming from a group with their pedigree, and when compared with some other campaigns from groups with similar circumstances. They reached their goal within a week, hitting it on October 14th. It would go on to raise $250,000. The game would go up on Steam Early Access on September 24, 2015, before finally releasing 5 months later on February 24, 2016. The Flame in the Flood belongs to the survival genre, and the survival genre is by no means a new one. Games like Oregon Trail clearly set a foundation from which many games take inspiration. And survival horror is its own wildly popular beast. Today, multiplayer games with survival elements are king. The amount of people buying, playing, uploading videos for, and streaming games like Rust, H1Z1, Ark, Survival Evolved, and even Survivor Mode in Minecraft is staggering. There is obviously something resonating in people in which the possibility of being abandoned by technology and society and having to crudely fight for survival is exciting. I can see that, which is why the fact that I don't enjoy a lot of those games puzzles me. Playing The Flame in the Flood has helped elucidate for me what elements I think work in survival games, and which ones are more hindrance than helping. I think tone, method of exploration, how the narrative is authored, and the type of conflict that defines survival in the game are the key factors here. So keep this in mind as I talk about the different parts of the game. In The Flame in the Flood, the player's primary concern is managing the 4 stats that determine Scout's health. These are hunger, thirst, rest, and temperature. All interactions in the game, all damage and disease, is expressed by manipulating these stats. Going without food or water lowers the hunger and thirst gauge. Using inappropriate clothing or not taking shelter in rain lowers temperature, and not sleeping decreases rest. These are all pretty simple one-to-one things to maintain, but even animal attacks and disease are abstractly expressed in the stats. Getting a gash from a wolf will decrease rest, and not treating it will lead to staph infection and then sepsis, rapidly decreasing the various health stats. It is in this manner that the need to collect materials and craft tools comes in. Cattails to make cloth items, saplings for sturdy tools to fight back animals, set traps, or splint a broken leg. Flora to make medicine and poison. There's all kinds of materials of this manner. On the other side is meat and pelts that can only be gained by hunting, and must be used quickly or preserved, lest they go to waste. I often find that crafting systems are tacked on, a mechanic put in for its own sake, that asks a lot out of the player for very little in return. I think in multiplayer survival games this is especially the case. It's something you can do if you want, but can work around especially as a group. In other words, they often lack necessity. In this game, however, you need every item you can pick up or craft. About the time you start thinking a certain item might be a luxury, you find that the lack of it resulted in your demise. The rather simple crafting formulas you thought were a blessing at the beginning of the game become fearsome, as you realize you must make a decision on how to spend the materials common in several items, and not knowing what comes next, you may miss out on what you really need. This is intensified by the incredible lack of space for actual items the player has. Scout can initially hold, I think, a dozen or so different items, and the stat maximums are actually pretty low for the amount of materials available in bountiful areas. It takes a concerted effort to increase your holding capacity by making pouches out of rabbit skins, and that also means you're essentially giving up the first real upgrade for your clothing. Your dog companion, Aesop, can hold a few items. I myself gave him a lot of the emergency medicines or extra stacks of saplings, and I think giving him his own storage was a good decision. He is always with you anywhere you would craft, so the question of why not just give Scout more initial storage may crop up in your head. But the intent is clearly to build the player's relationship with Aesop, who is really your only companion in the wilderness. There's also the entertaining narrative tidbit that starting a new game with a previous save causes him to show up with the old items. In other words, even if you croak, Aesop, an animal, knows what it takes to survive, and goes to help someone else. You don't have to see or maintain stats for him, because he can take care of himself. The final place to store items is the raft, your home and method of progression. It has more space, but the items there are useless to you in the field, which means you must waste time and calories going back and forth if you aren't careful. The landmasses you stop at themselves have a very clear philosophy in their design. That being, he who dares wins. All the rare and very useful items, or at least the ones that form the bottlenecks in your plans, are found in the farthest section of the map. The farther away from your raft you go, the more dangerous the area becomes. Once again, it forces the player to make an important decision that affects their chances of survival. Should the player just grab the safe and simple items near the raft and keep moving, or should they push through and try to get the rare items? Those rare items might be what saves the player from a pack of wolves later. Then again, the boar defending those items might do them in itself. It leaves room for the player to author their own narrative around the journey, while still keeping them in check with the reality of survival. And the danger from wild animals is very real. Besides the docile and not very smart rabbits, all the other animals won't hesitate to bite, gore, or maul you. But what is really interesting is how real the interactions between these procedurally generated clusters are. Rabbits are hopping in and out of their burrows whether you are around or not. Wolves stick together, sleeping during the day, but going active in the evening. But once in a while, one will get up and have himself a rabbit for a snack. Snakes will stand their ground and hiss, but will slither towards the fire you make at night. Boars have a territory they patrol, and will go berserk to keep you out. But you can't just skirt around them trying to find the edge of their territory. They'll just decide that whatever's in front of you is their territory too. And the black bear won't bother anyone in its den unless you shoot it, in which case everything else on the map is dead. And dealing with them isn't easy. Don't think you can just set a spike trap down after a boar has seen you. That's the sure way to either die or get severely injured and angry. In fact, dangerous animals exacerbate what I believe is the game's biggest flaw. You spend way too much time on land in the menu, while things are happening around you unpaused. And the UI that's supposed to give you like a quick selection of tools, it just doesn't work well in a situation where you need to keep moving, because you have to stop to open it up and use it. But what's important here is the fauna doesn't feel like just items or enemies. They feel natural. They have behavior tendencies and interact with each other even if you aren't in sight. And because these maps each are pretty small, they're able to avoid the trap of many procedural generated elements in games, which is the obvious computer-made nature of it. It would be easy to believe if you were told that each island in the campaign mode was handcrafted. Even Aesop's interactions with the different animals just feels right. From the kind of growling he does to circling around and putting himself between you and danger, This is distinctly different from a game like Rust, where the central conflict is man versus man, and your main concern is what other players may do to you. There's a completely different mindset to working through Flame in the Flood's kind of conflict, which is essentially man versus nature. And in this way, nature is ambivalent rather than antagonistic, and the victory and progression come through individual effort rather than any sort of group cohesion. As such, the authorship is split cleanly between the developer and the player themselves, and it's never at the mercy of a random group of strangers. There's also something to be said for the fact that man can at best survive and flourish versus nature, as opposed to definitely defeating it, as you can have happen in man versus man conflict. If half the game is getting resources from land, the other half is rafting through the southern riverside. This is such a unique element of the game, in fact, it's probably one of the selling points when talking to people about it. The rafting sections are not a static experience. What they are to the player is very much up to circumstance. Sometimes they are a respite from the stressful trips on land, giving you a chance to take a breath and take in the game's beautiful visuals and music. Other times, they are much more stressful than land, as you go crashing through rapids, hoping you have enough raft health left to hit a checkpoint, and the items to repair the next opportunity. There's also the dire situation of having a disease you know is progressing, but not the items for a cure. In those cases, you have to let loose and take risks to find a piece of land that has what you need. These serve as your main method of world building. As you go further downstream, you find how the world is different from our own. From green, summery areas to swamp, to abandoned industrial areas, wastelands and floodplains, there's a lot to take in by observation, and plenty of room to speculate how the world got into the state it's in. As far as storytelling goes, the game keeps it pretty simple. You start the game by meeting Aesop. In his bag is a radio picking up a weird signal. It's not much, but it's enough to get the players heading south. There's this sort of hope that there's a fairy tale-like civilization still out there, and since you need to keep moving anyway, it's something to grab for. Your immediate survival concerns will dominate the starting hours of play. In fact, you're so prone to visiting every stop that it seems to be quite a faraway goal. But then you find the source at the dam, and all of a sudden, Angel City is a tangible destination. And with the opening of the dam, the game really begins. The player starts making choices not just to survive, but also in order to get to and see this place quicker. This, I think, is one of the game's more devious traps, as Angel City turns out to be one of the places you need the most preparation for. But damn, if you don't come out of that situation feeling like you could conquer the world, even if you now know the world is a lot emptier than you thought. You then pursue one last hope, this kingdom some of the people you have met have talked about, and have to endure both a dry and wet hell to reach it. What about these people you are meeting across this journey? You almost double take when you see another human being in the wild. There seems to be a little bit of tragedy in each of them. From the feral children out on their own, the grave robber that has no scruples left, the big salesman guy who doesn't have anybody to buy his stuff, the old lady pretty much is a friendly witch, or that lonely guy outside Angel City. But there's also something kinda hopeful there. You still see southern hospitality shining through, and even genuine kindness from the man that asks you if you want to stay with him. All the while, he's fixing your boat, so he knows you're gonna leave. They're just kind of another piece of the puzzle that creates this really different but familiar kind of world. So far, I've said much about the gameplay, which is appropriate because it is a game, and that should be the focal point of discussion. The narrative and writing is quite simple and easy to understand, but what fills in the space between and informs upon both greatly is this game's visual and audio aesthetic. Nature may be dangerous, but it's still a beautiful thing in this game. River rapids are a mesmerizing thing to watch, and express the tone of the game so well from the tranquil beginnings to the rocky, desperate finish. Bright oranges and yellows fill the color palette from both the main character's clothing and that bright creative savior, fire. Day and night cycle with dramatic bursts of color from sunrise and sunset, and the rain and storms flash with so much power. It is such a refreshing change from the trend of survival being gray and brown with some occasional green grass. And the soundtrack, Oh my god. How have I been holding back talking about this game's soundtrack? It was composed by Americana artist Chuck Ragan, and it is the best country and American folk soundtrack I've ever heard in a game. That isn't even really a thing, is it? A country video game soundtrack? But the thing is, this is not just a companion piece to the game. It is interwoven so much into the gameplay. Somehow the perfect song always plays at the right moment, and it pulls out a really powerful emotional response when it does. Songs like Gathering Wood playing as the ode to Scout and Aesop's companionship, or Land Sick echoing the player's desire to stop peeling around and rush through the rapids to get to that next biome, they come to mind. Of course, you can't ignore the tender and sincere nature of What We Leave Behind playing in the game's final challenge. Having just broken through the dry wasteland, you arrive in the long and never-ending rain of the floodplains. You've gone so far and seen so little of anything you can call civilization. You only have this faint hope left, and water, your constant companion, that's what's going to do you in. It's going to kill you in the end, because it won't stop raining, and your temperature's dropping, and the hypothermia starts to set in. There's this demon wolf chasing you every time you try to stop at land for supplies, and you don't have enough left of anything to slay it. You really do feel like you aren't going to make it, just like most people, and the question pops up, is this okay? Is trying enough? Is the story and lessons that are going to be left behind from Scout's journey enough for the player? Catharsis, purification and purgation of fear, the release of pent-up emotion. Does it have a place in a game? Narrative drama exists in games for sure, players react to it, but it is an empathy for the character's situation, rather than an expression of their own internal emotions from playing. Survival games with no ending lack this. There's no point where you can shout, "It's all over, I am a survivor." An attempt at such would just result in a rock to the head. But I can't think of a better word to describe how this whole experience comes to an end. The situation is just as I described. Endless rain. No chance at finding a way out. Plummeting and dodging rocks in the rapids futilely. You can see your temperature bar hit near zero. Hypothermic death imminent. Near death, the player's vision wavers, creating a dark and familiar game over vignette around the center of the screen, compressing and squeezing the scene even tighter. You push through a tight cluster of rocks and... Catharsis. Open water as far as the eye can see. No rain. Sunlight. Hypothermia gone. Vignette gone. The UI is gone. Your worries are gone. Cue a variant of the game's theme song, The Flame in the Flood. You are that flame. That song is about you, a true survivor. The song is given its own time, lets itself play out. It deserves it. You deserve it. And there's the kingdom. You've made it. And it's fucking Disney World. Literally fucking Disney World. And everything is awesome and going well. Cynicism has become so ingrained into the survival genre, not just in games, but everything, This idea that the world left over is shit, and the people still living in it, if there are any, they're shit too, and they won't last long anyway. But this game, it says no. No, the world had a problem. It's dangerous, but it's still a beautiful place. People are still going to be good to each other. Yeah, those boars can fuck you up, but guess what? They can also be domesticated. Those wild plants can be proper crops. And you know what? Your dog, he can see his family again. What this game says is that survival is a second chance. So we've come to the end of my part of the critique. I hope these ideas, information, and interpretations were useful to you. As I said, a critique is not a one-person thing. I would love to hear other people's input and experiences with the game. Did you have similar feelings? Or did something I say come off as totally wrong to you? Am I looking at something from the wrong perspective? I want to hear it. Please write your own thoughts in the comments below. I hope to get some real discussion going. If there's a good amount of comments or some high-quality ones, I'll be sure to take some of them and post a video response with them. I'll have more of these format videos in the future. Until then, this is the Cozy Corner. Have a good one. Oh, and if you like what I'm doing, subscribe so you can see more.